Welcome to BWI Live. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. The busiest show of the week, one of my favorite shows of the week, because we just get to talk about what happened yesterday. We spent a lot of time at the Penn State football practice facility, and by a lot of time, I mean an hour and a half. We got to see practice, got to talk to James Franklin, Andy Kotelnicki, a couple of different players, and we're here to give you our impressions of that, plus hear from you on the BWI Mailbag coming up at the end of the show, so that you know right now off the top, we're going to be talking to you in the live chat. If you got some comments, some thoughts, we'll take the best ones and put them in the mailbag. But of course, we'll be having a conversation throughout the show. You got some good one-liners. You got some things you want to talk about from yesterday. If you saw some of our coverage already, that's all coming up on the show today. But of course, the stars, Sean Fitz, publisher of Blue White Illustrated, Nate Bauer, senior editor of Blue White Illustrated, longtime veteran reporters covering the team, here to give you the good stuff. So, Fitz, how you doing this morning? And what are you thinking about after yesterday?
Oh, thinking about a lot. Thinking about it. Just posted a story, another 4-star confirmation for an official visit this summer. So check that out if you're on BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. But yeah, that's where I'm at right now. It's football, man. It's kind of football. We watch some drills and stuff like that. I think people are, people have an expectation of what we see when we go to these weekly things. It's really not as much as you'd like. So we got to, filter that with what we're hearing. Nate did an awesome buzzworthy column yesterday about what we're hearing from spring ball so far. Ryan Snyder's chimed in with some injury news. So Blue White Illustrated is a place to go for spring ball coverage.
Yeah, we're going to interview Nate about that in just a minute. Actually, Nate, let's just do it right now.
Wow.
Your article was awesome, gave a lot of good insight, and I want to open the floor. First off, as Fitz said, go check it out at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. You can sign up right now for spring football, and if you're a YouTube or podcast member, you listen to the show, you watch the show, you get an extra month for $1, because we love the fact that you support us. We want to give you a little bit longer of a gateway into the site. So use code PSU1 for 2 months. You get that for just $1, and you can read Nate's article, which he's going to tell you a little bit about right now. So, Nate, what did you learn this week?
Yeah. What did you learn this week? There's stuff happening, right? I think that if I was to ballpark it and not give away the game, right? We want people to check out the article for sure. It is that there is more momentum and standout, maybe is the right word, performances coming from the defensive side of the ball than the offensive side of the ball. I don't think that's a surprise really to anybody. Really. Just given everything that Penn State is dealing with. Look, it's funny because I asked Devon Elise last night whether or not there's carry, right? The defense is in this interesting spot where, yes, they changed coordinators and Manny had this presence, but also they were awesome last year, and many of the awesome pieces are coming back, right? So yes, they lost some, but there's this general vibe of, okay, you lose 2 defensive ends to the NFL, you lose 3 cornerbacks to the NFL, but they're still going to be really good, right? That's the expectation. And drop a little hint here, part of that expectation of why they're going to be really good is some of the players that I mentioned in the story that you are all commanded to go check out. So yeah, that's kind of the early vibe out of spring ball, and a couple of offensive directions, I would say, to keep an eye on. Frank, you've covered some of it yourself that are going to be interesting over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, some of the things we talked about here on the channel over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com as well. I always like it when I notice something and go, hey, this looks like a thing, and then I get a text from Nate. He's like, yeah, you were right about that. That always feels good, where I'm like, I'm seeing something, and you never know, but then it comes back and it's gold.
Frank, you're one of the you're one of the very few people. There are some, right, but I feel like Penn State opens those availabilities to us, right, to reporters, and we're expected to just see players running through individual drills that can't possibly have any implications on anything that they're doing, right? Franklin doesn't like to give away that kind of stuff. And yet And yet you still see some things that give, at minimum, some insight, right? Some idea of which direction they'd like to go. So
my observations from yesterday are we won't be getting into those, because some of the things I saw yesterday, they're not. I don't think it would be appropriate to be talking about those things, because they get pretty deep into some of the changes that Penn State wants to make this upcoming season. But we do have practice to talk about. So, Fitz, I want to get to you, because Nate and I were on the offensive side, and I just love learning from you guys, and I didn't get to see the defense. So what did you see? What did you learn yesterday about the defense? And once again, all these articles are in the comments of this, the description of the video, so you can go check out Fitz's observations from practice, Nate's observations from practice, and his Buzzworthy column if you just click on those. But Fitz, what were your high-level thoughts of what happened yesterday at practice?
First off, a hearty thank you to you guys for giving me defense. It's like cruise control over there. Like I know there's a new coach, Tom Allen, Justin Lustig's over there as well. But, you guys are tasked with finding how they're going to fix things. I'm tasked with finding how they're going to sustain things. And there's a big difference there. So you look at what Penn State's bringing back on defense, and yes, they lost Adisa, Chop. You just go down. They lost a lot of talented players, three starting quarterbacks, three all Big Ten cornerbacks. And they're going to be able to replace it. And it's just like, okay, we're just filling in jersey numbers here. That's not to say that there won't be a drop off at some positions, but at the same time, like the bar was so high that, you're feeling pretty good, even if you fall a little bit there. So I appreciate the stress-free opportunity to cover the defensive side of the ball. So thank you both for that. I'll let you guys go break down the receivers and let people yell at you for, getting the wrong number or something like that. It's a little bit different. We've seen some different drills this year. I think Tom Allen brought a lot from his wealth of knowledge and his background, especially on the defensive side of the ball and being a head coach. So you're going around and you're looking at different drills, and you're pairing off safeties and corner. You're combining safeties and corners, which they really haven't done before. It's been mostly just one field on the, or one position on this field, the other position on that field. So it's been interesting to watch them sort of combine. And we talked to James Franklin last night. He was asked about the nickel competition, and there's no information to come out of it because it's so early in camp. But, the strong indications are that they want to play three safeties, and that means moving a safety to nickel. So having those safeties with corner skills and corner, repetitions and things like that is going to be important. So it's the little things you pick up. Tom Allen is different from Manny Diaz. Tom Allen loves using a whistle. And if you watched the house video yesterday, he loves saying, yeah, baby. Like he's a modern day Jim the Anvil Neidhart. He just that's all that comes out of his mouth. But it's been cool to watch the difference between him and Manny Diaz. Not a ton of differences, but subtle differences. And it'd be interesting to talk about some of the themes that we thought this defense is heading for this spring. And like I said, it's just so much easier to cover the defense than it is to cover the offense.
Yeah, and just another thing that came out of that, and he just seems likable. Like the way he presents himself to the players, enthusiastic, energetic. You noticed some of those things at practice yesterday?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's still some position groups that are feeling themselves out. Corner has a ton of talent. You can see it. And you can't always see it with those guys, but they're rolling 6 guys out there. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But I'm not sure who's going to start, because and that's not because nobody's good. It's because there's going to be a lot of competition in that area. AJ Harris seems like a dude. He's I don't want to give away some of the stuff that Nate wrote about yesterday, but just from everybody that you talk to, AJ Harris looks like a guy that can play at this level really well. So interested to see that. Interesting to see more of the chatter on the 3 safeties. No denied Dennis Sutton once again, which not particularly worried about that, but that's been a theme this spring. But yeah, the defensive side of the ball. Don't want to call it cruise control because those guys are working hard, but at the same time, there's a lot less to wring your hands about on that side.
Going to be interesting to get into some of the offensive observations with Nate. But first, very excited to tell you about this. Nittany Cards Plus. They are a sponsor here on the BWI Live Show, and we are going full live. Nittany Cards Plus, 2 p.m., Friday, April 12th. That is the day before the Blue-White game. We are going to be live, if you're checking it out here on the YouTube channel, in the shop, doing a broadcast, previewing the game. Fitz, Nate, myself, we're going to be there and doing the show, a special Friday show live at 2 p.m. So come join us. If you haven't heard, Nittany Cards Plus in-state college is Center County's only dedicated sports trading card and collectible shop. You can see here they major, obviously, in Penn State football trading cards, the Bowman cards, some of the Panini, Upper Deck, Tops. They have all of the different brands that you can buy in trading cards, and I know that these the trading cards are having a huge comeback now, and this is something that a lot of people are interested in, especially if you got kids. They're getting into the game. They're getting into sports. They have all the sports, by the way, not just Penn State. You can see they've got Philly, they've got Pittsburgh, they've got dedicated areas for all of those things, and of course, the Penn State collection and memorabilia. So if you want to check out all that stuff, plus they have all the stuff you need to keep your cards in pristine condition and keep their value, all of the sleeves and all of those things. I know I'm saying stuff a lot right here because I don't know all the technical details and names for these things, but you got to go check it out. Like, it is an awesome place. And if you haven't seen it yet, it is at 1631 South Atherton Street. It's next to the PNC In-State College on South Atherton and across from CVS. So if you're a Penn State fan who, like, my sister went to Penn State and she only knows College and Beaver, like she only knows downtown. Just get on Atherton, go south. When you see a CVS, it's on the left. Pretty easy to find. So Nittany Cards Plus, that's where we're going to be on Friday, April 12th. Come check all that out. Okay, Nate, offense. As Fitz said, a lot of stuff to work through. A lot of intrigue, interest from quarterback on down. What were your general takeaways from the offense yesterday?
Boy, oh boy. Here's a question, right? We watched the receivers, right? And a couple of things. One is that I've said this before. I'm going to continue to say it, and I'm going to pound this drum over and over again. The running backs are going to be more involved in the passing game. That is, I feel, a certainty coming in this coming season. Certainly, you saw it last year, like literally between 2022 and 2023. That was a major point anyway, was Nick Singleton correcting some of his drops, right? And making advancements in the passing game. And then it feels almost like they've been dancing around saying it outright. But when James Franklin has said, talked about some of the things that they did differently at the end of last season in the last couple of games, like that was one of them, right? Was involving Singleton, getting him in space and getting him to be able to make some of those explosive plays that had been tougher to get, right, in the running game for the first 10 games of the year. So that's one. And then two, and this is more for T. Frank and you, Fitz. Is it unreasonable to expect a line of receivers, including the top ones that Penn State has, to get through 4 minutes of passing lines without a drop?
Fitz, what do you think?
Is it unreasonable?
Yeah.
I mean, it happens, but I think they should be able to do that. Yeah.
I mean, going from James Franklin's perspective, he screams every practice 100% on air, meaning there are no defensive backs, so catches should be clean, quarterbacks shouldn't miss, everything should be 100%. So I get what you're saying, and that's always the rub, right? Like, coaches hold everyone to the highest of standards, but is that attainable all the time? So
look, there's going to be bad passes, right?
Yeah.
I guess my larger point is we go into these things as the media, right? And as report, look, bottom line here is we rely on feedback from people who are able to see or be around or what have you, practice all the time, right? Like that is the primary source of how we're getting feedback on how things progress. But at the same time, we do get these snippets weekly. We get these 10-minute bursts, right? And with a position like that at receiver that there are questions about and there were issues with last season, and you're constantly wondering whether or not they're going to take that next step and be able to develop in the direction that they need to for Penn State to have the success that they want, that you would see some of that come to fruition within those 5 minutes, right? Like that you would see elements of that. And I'm just not sure I do. Right? Like I'm just not sure that consistency is there. At least, like I said, is it fair to judge this on a 5-minute window? Absolutely not. But at the same time, like it works both ways. It's to the positive and to the benefit. And my takeaway from yesterday was seeing too many drop passes, right?
Yeah.
Like that's kind of the bottom line on that. And I mean, I hate to frame it that way, but for a group that has this pressure on it, including Drew Aller and including the quarterback, right? To be able to have that connection, just avoiding that situation.
Are you talking, Nate, specifically? Go ahead, Fitz.
Sorry, as someone who's on the defensive end of the field, I mean, what are we talking? Like, are we talking a large percentage? Are we talking like just a couple here and there? Are we talking walk-ons? Are we talking scout? I mean, like, I'm just trying to figure out what your gauge is here.
Scholarship receivers not catching catchable passes, right? Just kind of like how many? I wasn't keeping track. Maybe it's standing out more to me than it did to T. Frank. T. Frank, you were there. What were your impressions?
My problem was, Nate, as we discussed at practice, I was trying to look at everybody. So I was looking at the offensive line for part of the practice. I was trying to find out what they were doing. I was looking at the quarterbacks. So I don't have a good gauge. I haven't gauged on like individual players, but going through the drills, I only noticed one drop. But again, like I said, I was not watching the same way you were.
But it's like again, like this is the danger of this, right? I'm fleshing this out loud on this show with you guys.
Yeah. And this is a circle of trust, by the way. Everyone who watches this, we're giving Nate the benefit of the doubt that he's doing that. He's giving you this. So don't make us regret that.
It's hard to talk like people don't realize that.
But it's like
to talk it out. Yeah, for sure.
Is it too much, right? Is it too much? Is it not enough concern, right? Like, how do you balance this based on seeing a snapshot of practice? Yeah. I'm not exactly sure, but I do think it's somewhat telling that it aligns with a lack of real buzz for that position anyway, right? Like it's kind of these two things melding together.
Last year, I guess, just going off of my anecdotal experience, right? So I don't really have anything data-wise to give you. But last year, some of my observations were watching spring football. Ooh, Nick Singleton's still fighting the football when it comes to him. But like, I don't think drops were an issue. I think he got better as a receiver. On the other hand, I saw some of the similar issues with the receivers, specifically the top guys not being consistent, not looking like they had focus and follow through, specifically in areas like this where you have routes on air. So I think when you have a totality of evidence, maybe like week 3, if you're starting to see a similar theme and pattern coming through, I think it's absolutely fair to take those 10-minute snippets and say, maybe it is only 30 minutes total of however much spring football, but it's been the same. And, you're extrapolating, but it is something that you have seen observationally more than once. You would expect to see a good day every once in a while. So I think that's a fair conversation to have about what our limited window is, but also being able to recognize patterns.
Maybe the better way to frame this is you think to yourself, this is just one rep, right? Like this is just one, whatever, like I'm in a 2-hour practice, right? Like who cares? But to me, it provides a little bit of a window into what Penn State's coaching staff is considering when making decisions on personnel, right? In guys who play in games. Like when James Franklin talks about consistency at that position, and that has been the conversation with that position for 2 years. That's it. Like that's it. Are you doing this correctly at a high level at 100%? In practice when nobody's watching and when everybody's watching. And if the answer is no, then that creates challenges, I think, for that group. So we'll see.
They were an interesting group to watch. One of the things I noticed is they were working on some separation in the route sort of drills, which gave some, I think, added context to talent levels, because you watch some guys go through that drill and there are people who are natural, like basketball movers. Fitz, you know what I'm talking about, when the guys in route that can make you uncomfortable if you're a defensive back. So like Tyler Johnson looks really good moving. He looks like a guy that can do those things fluidly. Trey Wallace, the reason everyone's really high on him, oh buddy, what he was doing what everyone else was doing, but at like 1.5 times the speed. Yeah. So you can see the talent levels in these guys, but when they're throwing the football, that's what Nate is talking about. So I just thought that was an interesting little nugget to add on to the end of that conversation. I do want to move on to James Franklin's comments, because there was a good bit of conversation after practice.
Can we like catch one thing here? Bradley said something in the chat. He's very worried about how the receivers looked. I think that's Nate. What Nate's trying to get at here is like it's a small window. Like it doesn't have to be the top. It doesn't have to be the bottom. Like seems like they're working through this. Nate, any thoughts on just seeing that comment? As I make you talk live again.
No,
but
I'm not
it
sure.
Seems like it's either got to be one or the other, but it doesn't. Like
it doesn't. It doesn't. I mean, I don't think that anybody realistically, I try to be as even-handed about all of this as I possibly can. I'm not a hot take guy. I'm not a come down on everyone guy. Like that's not my thing. And I'm not even a gush over everyone guy, save for Nick Singleton, because I think he's really good. But if receiver isn't a concern, like if receiver isn't a concern, realistically, like I think we're being dishonest in not acknowledging that group has questions to answer. Like bottom line, right? That is the most diplomatic way that I can frame it, is they have questions to answer coming off of last season. Drew Aller has questions to answer. There are lots of people, like I don't want to single them out as saying that's the only group that has questions to answer, but at the same time, you have to be able to acknowledge, like we're going to see. And I think it's going to be interesting to, even within the short window of spring practice, last year, there were vibes towards the end of spring practice that certain players had taken strides, right? Yep. That there was development made. And so is it too early right now to ask about that? Absolutely. It is. Like right within a week, within 4 practices, it's way too early.
That's what I'm getting at. The line
in the sand way too early
is not there.
But when we get to April 13th,
sure.
Yeah, I mean that needs to be a conversation.
More of the story, not all the story, but more of the story.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's the thing that most people I think here are reacting to, and he's the reason I think Bradley is asking about Julian Fleming is it's the same cast of characters. So there's a backlog of information that we don't have an update on. So some of these things that they've been working on in the offseason might not be coming to fruition through 4 practices. And to answer your question, when I saw him, Fleming looked good. Like, again, catches the ball well, runs pretty good routes. The things that you want to see out of a veteran receiver, I mean, I saw them in 2 times that I saw him catch the football, which, again, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, you saw. We are going to be talking about the receivers later. Don't worry. We got more of that coming up. But just so that we have a palate cleanser, here we're going to have some transition music.
They have both gotten reps with runs.
That might be one of my favorite underappreciated intros. Between the lines, we're talking about James Franklin's post-practice press conference. Fitz, what stood out to you about some of the things, the topics that were brought up and what James Franklin responded with about practice through the first week of spring ball?
The East Stroudsburg psychology major coming out last night and talking about the why when it comes to installation and learning the offense. And that is one of the things that he really complimented Andy Kotelnicki on with the, I guess, the purpose of why you're doing things. Like, why are you in this position? Not because that's where the sheet says that you need to block, but here's how you in this position is helping us get to our total goal. And Andy talked a little bit about that afterward. It's more the philosophy of things and understanding, like, I mean, to me, it more comes off as basketball. when you're talking about running plays and sets and things like that. Like, because you understand without the ball in your hand that you have a purpose, and that purpose is to help the other guys. With football, it's a little bit different because you're tossing the Nick Singleton, you're handing off to Katron Allen, you're doing all that kind of stuff. So I think that there is a way to find your identity by understanding what you're doing. And to me, was this a backhanded swipe at last year? Maybe a little bit. Like, and let's be honest, we've seen plenty of that in the last couple of months. But it just seems like there's more of the why, more of the philosophy, more of the things that, can help everybody. And I think that that's hammering home to the entire offense, but number 15 in particular.
And it kind of goes to the larger conversation, and this has been James Franklin's drumbeat this spring, is we're going about installation differently to fix problems from the past. Also is what it sounds like, Fitz, of he's had to install a lot of offenses over the last 10 years with different offensive coordinators, and it seems like this year he's saying, we're going to try this differently so that we can accelerate the learning process, and that goes into this general conversation about Andy Kotelnicki and some of his strengths. Is that a fair tie-in there?
Yeah, I think it's like, okay, you're remodeling, redoing your house. You're working on the foundation. Like, they're working on the foundation. They're not working on putting in an extension, an addition on, putting on a nice room on the back of your house. You're working on fixing the foundation, because that is what's going to bring the value to your house in the long run. Your house is not going to fall over. Like, I think that's the important part here. And when you do that with a quarterback who now has experience, but at the same time, a quarterback that needs to admittedly take the next step and not fall back on 25-2 touchdown to interception, all these numbers that have a little bit of a hollow element to them. I think that that's the important thing, is understanding the why and understanding where these guys are going to be, because we've talked about his progressions before. It's not that he's not going through his progressions. It's ample amount of time spent on the proper progression. And I think that is a huge, huge element of what Aller's game can be.
Yeah, absolutely. Nate, some of your thoughts about the most interesting thing that sticks out to you from what James Franklin talked about last night?
Oh, the most interesting thing. I thought the JB Nelson stuff was interesting, mostly because I think that maybe people have gotten the impression that this is a long-term move to tackle. And I think Franklin more or less dismissed that, right? I don't know if that was your guys' impression, but like my take on JB Nelson is Drew Shelton's out. You need this position flexibility anyway. Nelson can do that. We've known that for really a year and a half, I think. But also Shelton will be back, right? Shelton will be back, and they'll have to figure some things out there on the offensive line. But I think that Nelson's ability to play guard or tackle is a strength of Penn State, right? Like, that's a good thing for Penn State to have. I'm just not sure that it necessarily indicates that he will end up there for the season. And I would strongly suggest that he won't. So,
Fitz, this is a conversation that I don't think we've had enough yet, but learning that Drew Shelton had an injury last year and they had to have surgery after the season, and he played through it. It puts a massive difference in my analysis of his performance last year, especially during that bowl game where we got to see him full time. Have you had an opportunity to kind of rectify or talk about in your own mind his trajectory as a football player, given that we have that information now that we didn't have when we were watching him and doing that live analysis and opinion in our mind? Do you think that there needs to be a correction, I think, in the general conversation around Drew Shelton?
I love the latest comment in the YouTube thread that you craft great open-ended and loaded questions, and then all of a sudden you just go and send it my way. I'm trying not really to fall into that trap and let, I don't want to say let him off the hook, but like, there are plenty of things in Drew Shelton's game that need improvement, and whether that's an injury, that can contribute to it, obviously, but there are a lot of things that we saw, last spring, early in the season, that, he's got a lot of work to do. Now, based on the feedback that we've gotten from people, they think he's the starter. They think he's going to be the guy that they'll be okay dropping in there. It's going to be a drop off from Olu. Anybody would be a drop off from Olu. But at the same time, I think that they feel confident in his ability to get where he needs to be, or I guess maybe they feel confident in where his life meter like ends, like where, like
Right.
how much potential that he has. And while acknowledging, and I think this is an overall theme of last night and really what Franklin has said all spring, they got a lot of work to do. They got a lot of work to do on the offensive side of the ball, while acknowledging that they can have competition, that they can have these guys that make these strides and to get where they're going. I mean, it's just like trying to fill up, not fill up, that's probably the wrong word to say, but trying to get where they need to get. Like there's a long way, a lot of progress that needs to be made to get there. And they're acknowledging that they're not there yet.
Yeah.
And that includes a guy like Shelton.
Yeah. I guess the parts of his game that I was surprised by in the bowl game was like he was a good run blocker. And then suddenly he's fallen off blocks that I've never seen before. Right. And I think that contributes to part of it. But you're right. Some of the things we saw in pass protection, it just, I guess the conversation, Nate and I talked about this on Monday, the conversation around Kalen King, we do this pendulum thing where everyone loves Kalen King in 2022. Suddenly every Penn State fan is like, this is what you get for leaving early and not being in the bowl game. And with Drew Shelton, some of the conversation is like, kind of eyeballing and backdooring. Can Nolan Rucci play left tackle? Maybe. Do we want to move a guy over from that right side? And if Penn State feels the way they do about Drew Shelton, I think that the conversation needs a little bit of balance. I think from both perspectives, because you are right though. Like there are things he absolutely has to get better at that we've seen throughout the last 2 years.
Yeah, and like I said, there's going to be a drop off. Olu and Caden too. Like Caden, we don't understand how good that he was. Like that was the thing. Like we went into last spring talking about is Shelton going to take this job from Caden? And Caden demonstrably took it back and was much better than Shelton. So like, yes, that is one of those things that we're going into this year kind of scratching our head about, saying, okay, they've got tackle bodies, they've got guys that, you know, should have the feet and everything like that, but tackle is still a worry spot for me. Like that's kind of how I'm looking at it. Even if Drew Shelton's in there this spring, that's probably the storyline.
Offensive line isn't just the tackle position. Nate, I think this is your wheelhouse. Sal Wormley coming back. Conversation that James Franklin had when asked about Sal Wormley, and the impact of bringing back your starting right guard. What do you think about that topic yesterday?
Yeah, to be fair, and I don't want this to sound braggy, right? Like it doesn't mean I'm ahead of the curve, but when Franklin was on his radio show last year and first floated, he didn't say Sal's name specifically, but it was clear what the intention was. Like we talked about that. Right? It was like, oh, there's a possibility that a couple of these guys, and clearly it was Caden and Sal were the two that he was talking about that had extra eligibility and could come back, and what that would mean for them. And it happened, right? And so Franklin was asked whether or not it was a surprise to him, and nothing's just right. Like they know, right? They
right.
As a coaching staff, you have that communication and you have those conversations. I think that sometimes there's surprises, but not often. And Sal was not one of them. And so it was interesting to hear Franklin frame it as, yeah, we like Sal. There wasn't even really much of a conversation. Sal was coming back. And what that means is you get a starter at right guard for the last 2 years, right? He
means you don't have to replace 4 starters in the offensive line.
Yeah,
it's huge. It's huge.
Yeah.
One thing if I could just drop this in here as a little nugget, I was with Devon last night, right? Doing an interview, and we were
like at the first or. No.
What's that? No. He's a professional. He doesn't do those kind of things. No, but I just asked him about the interior of the offensive line, and like he lit up like Christmas Day talking about Cooper Cousins. So for anybody who he has not made, the hype train has arrived, and with just some very interesting insights in the sense of his approach to the whole thing is unique. It's rare for that age, for a guy who has just enrolled at Penn State, and you're trying to figure out all of the other things in life right? We always forget about that when we talk about football players, but like they got to go to class sometimes, and they have like girlfriends and stuff, right? There's other stuff happening in their lives that can often be a distraction for those guys when they first get to Penn State or any other university. I think Ellie's put it as he's not sure if he leaves the building. Like if Cooper Cousins ever leaves the Lash building, that he effectively lives there, which is, that's different. It should create for some interesting dynamics this spring and summer.
We're going to fold in some of our conversation about other people other than James Franklin into the mailbag session because we got to get to that here quickly. But my favorite, this is a labor of love now, YouTube comment theater. And have you guys ever heard of empathic personalities, where you don't you just have an ability to feel the vibe in the room? You're more attuned to that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, this is all done in love from our viewers on YouTube. But if you're upset with the way you're portrayed on the YouTube channel, just remember there's a vibe you're bringing with your comments, and I am simply mirroring that through the power of AI.
Incredible what a natural Andon is. Big things coming for sure, even if it isn't on the field. We are.
Head fakes needed improvement before THROWING.
What fans don't want DeLuca out there? You done tripped and hit your head.
There are still questions at pound. Is Abdul Carter still on the team?
Maybe Franklin's motive is to outlast all the great coaches that will and are leaving the sport, so that potentially he can get into a playoff game finally. It's shocking how bad a sideline coach he is, and more shocking that the We Are Nation accepts his record against top 10 teams. Now comes an expanded playoff, and if Franklin gets this team in, all the We Are followers will come out of the woodwork hailing this guy as fantastic. All the while guys like Saban are walking past multiple trophies at their homes from knowing the game better. Name one coach that has been successful as a head coach that came out of Penn State under Franklin. Moorhead got fired, and I'm sure doesn't have anything good to say about Franklin's skills as a coach. Diaz ran away, and it looked like he couldn't wait to leave. Tell me anyone that's gone public and praised Franklin's coaching skills.
James Franklin better step up. Championship / like Joe Pa.
Oh, are we getting Visor Drew? He's about to go crazy like in Madden when you make a player and he ain't great yet, but he's going to look good.
He didn't even try to sprint.
You know he doesn't have to run all the way to the camera, right? It's only 40 yards. T. Frank.
When you spend 0 time training for your pro day or working with a combined coach. What a terrible run.
Put Bo in.
Thank you for your attention. I can see everyone behind the scenes, and I saw Fitz face palm at the beginning of the very long rant in the middle, and I just thought, oh buddy, it's gonna get worse before it gets better. Like, this is only the first 2 lines of something, a manifesto. There's a reason, like, when I put in these things, I put in Shakespeare giving a political rally speech to Penn State fans, because that's what it was. That's exactly what it was. But let's get to the mailbag. Let's get to some of the conversations that you wanted to have here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. I'm going to get to this one to start because Mech Engineer has been in the chat. He's got some questions he wants to have here on the show. He says, good morning, fellas. Corners are still a huge question mark for him. Yesterday on the show, I said Cam Miller is Penn State's best corner, talking about some of the positional breakdowns of who might play where and not wanting to play him in the slot. He says, I can't get his Peach Bowl performance out of my head. So, Fitz, I want to come to you because this is also a conversation we're having about the corners from the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. I'll just get to this. On the other side, Poncho550 says, is it safe to say that the cornerback room is the most competitive top to bottom on the team? So, Fitz, which is it? Concerned or optimistic about the depth and talent that they have?
once again, willing to give Terry Smith the benefit of the doubt here. Like they need to be more experienced, and you're not going to get that in the offseason. Again, I'm going to push back on the Peach Bowl stuff. Cam Miller was not as bad as you think he was. He was in position. He needs to finish plays. Like there's a difference between being bad and what he put together on that tape. He needs to be better, no doubt about it. But at the same time, you need to finish plays, and that's not something you get when you don't play a full-time. You don't play that position full time. This group is very competitive top to bottom. And even saying what I just said about Cam Miller, like we pencil him in as a starter, but he could very well be a second team guy, like because of guys like Jalen Kimber, AJ Harris, who I talked about a little bit earlier. It seems like I don't want to pencil him in yet because it's been 4 practices, but he seems like a guy that fits all the characteristics of a guy that's going to play a lot. Kimber's interesting, and James kind of touched on this last night because it is later in his career. There's a little bit more at stake here. It's kind of like Storm Duck last year. So Be curious to see how he fits in and where he sees himself fitting in the fall coming out of spring. You got Elliot Washington. We've heard some, for the first time, we've heard some good things on Davian Collins as well. So like that group from top to bottom seems pretty solid. Belgrave Shorter, guy that I'm extremely high on, has done some nice things as well.
He looks great for a freshman. That dude is strapped.
Yes, he is. And he came in 6 foot. I don't know if they listen to 5'11", 6 foot, but 190 some pounds. Whereas John Mitchell comes in, he's 170 some pounds. Like there's a big difference physically in those two guys. And when you step up to play Big Ten football, there's a difference there. Like, so be interesting to see how how the developmental track goes for both those guys, but also at the same time, they don't need them. Like they don't need them to play. And I don't know that they're advanced enough where they can crack like a Kalen King did a couple of years ago, where they can crack that rotation. So I'll be interested to see where it comes, but yeah, the competitiveness is there. There's talent there. It's just a matter of sorting those guys out. And going to be interesting to see how it goes, because like I said, Miller, we penciled in as a starter, but like, why I don't see that a need to name any of those guys a starter, because that group is so clustered. I'll say clustered. I think that's the way to go. So I'm encouraged by what we've seen from corners so far. You trust Terry Smith. You trust the track record that he's put together. I think they will be fine. And the elephant in the room here when they play in the Big Ten, and this is going to change a little bit, bringing in the West Coast teams. How often are you relying on corners in the Big Ten? So I think that helps them get where they need to be.
And Nate, this is intentional too. Two questions for you. First off, did James Franklin was he asked about AJ Harris specifically yesterday? He was asked about the transfers, right?
Yeah.
And this is kind of the idea where we come into this season, and I think generally we had positive evaluations of Zion Tracy's athleticism, and he got to play a little bit last year, and then Cam Miller, as Fitz just laid out there. But Penn State wasn't satisfied. They brought in guys to challenge those corners, and this is the development. Now that they're out there and have the opportunity to challenge them, we're seeing there's the opportunity to upset the depth chart, where I think sometimes people give the impression that incumbents are always incumbents, and it's kind of lip service to the competition. But this seems like the plan, right?
Well, I think that last year offers a demonstration that it works both ways, right? Is they brought in Storm Duck last year too. And with the expectation,
he's all ACC corner. Yeah. He wasn't good enough.
He wasn't good enough, and he didn't win the job. Right. And so there's that balance there, right? Where to me, it does not hurt you to have 4, 5, potentially 6 cornerbacks who bring it, right? And are challenged to raise the level of their performances every day. I think that only helps what they're doing there. And, certainly some good buzz, some feedback on certainly both of the new guys, but Harris, maybe a teensy bit more. I think that's fair.
Yeah. And I'm glad that physicality that you saw on tape at Georgia translates, because that was his main thing, and maybe you wouldn't see that unless they get on the field. But I got the sense Georgia recruited him because he can destroy guys at the line of scrimmage being physical. And if that's translating here, I think that's a positive sign that the athleticism and all those things, as Fitz and I have talked about, and Fitz, I think, pointed out really well, he's a Big Ten corner.
Stereotypical Big Ten corner. Yeah.
Yeah. And if those things are translating quickly, that's a huge benefit for Penn State. Nate, I'm going to come back to you with this question. JC Corrigan asks a philosophical one. Do Penn State fans live on Apathy Street in a house with low ceilings? If so, is that justified? So, does apathy and low expectations reign for Penn State fans?
I'm going to throw this in here. Low ceilings are awful. So we're aware. Yeah.
Okay, so here's the deal. It depends on your perspective, right, in terms of what we're talking about. Because if that question is framed as, oh, there's a bunch of Penn State fans that don't really care one way or the other whether or not Penn State wins a national championship, and so they're fully supportive and fully invested in the program no matter what, no. Not accurate. Not accurate. If the question is framed as Penn State fans collectively,
Get context.
Are apathetic about their support, then yes. Yeah, like yeah. There are no heroes in this story, right? The system itself is stupid. It is so dumb. I explained it yesterday on the board. Can I do like 2 minutes here? Can I just do just 2 minutes?
Sure.
This is basketball centric, okay? But it applies to football at the same time. A system has been created where NIL is a Ponzi scheme, okay? The program, right? So the program, and I'm not talking just about Penn State. This is everywhere. The program has to make promises to prospective student athletes, wherever they're coming from, right? Whether that's the transfer portal, whether that's high school level. They are making promises and commitments to them for financial, right, implications, okay? They can't be clear, right, until this most recent stay, and it still hasn't been like put into the books, but until now, you haven't been able to actually guarantee that, right? There's no contract. And so it's an honor bond between the student athlete and their representatives and the school that money will be there, okay? The program itself is making those commitments based on what is being told to them by the collective, right? So the collective says, hey, this is what we anticipate our resources to be, right? So you've got a pool of, for football, let's say $5 million, right? And that is how you can kind of ballpark this and map out where you're going to go with this. Collectives don't actually have the money in hand that they are telling, right? Like, and everybody knows this, okay? The collectives are operating under a system where promises from donors are being made to them that these donations will come in, okay? And so the collective is ballparking. So at every step of the way, you're ballparking with the buck stopping literally with donors who it is remarkably and wildly unfair that it is on them to be able, it is on them to come through with the promises that they make and the commitments that they make for a future date, right? Like that's how donations work. That's how giving works, development works at this level in college athletics, but also university giving. It's all based on, okay, you're budgeting today for promises that are being made to you for future donations. It's stupid. It's so dumb. If the schools could do it, they would guarantee the money themselves. Like this is why all of this has to go in-house so that the schools themselves have this pot of money that they can then distribute for player compensation the way that they want, right? The way, so that there's none of this other extra stuff, so that you don't need to rely on donations, so that you don't need to rely on the collective to be able to acquire those donations and then have the collective itself sign off on how those donations are going to be utilized. Like it's mind-boggling in how inefficient and stupid it is, and it needs to be fixed immediately. And I say all of that in response to that apathy question.
Thank you.
That's it. I'm done.
Cede the rest of your time to the speaker. Fitz, coming to you with this question. We got two more that I want to get to because we promised them earlier in the show, and I know, Fitz, that you wanted to talk about this one specifically, coming from the Blue White Illustrated message board. And by the way, if you have a question, it's in the chat we don't get to today. I am going to do a follow-up over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com on some of these mailbag questions. If we don't get to, I'm going to try and do that more often as we go throughout the year. So if you didn't get yours on the show today, there will be a way to answer them either on a future mailbag show or in that article. So just be on the lookout for that. This question coming from PSU Ram on the Blue White Illustrated message board. 3 new coordinators, all coming from Kansas, Indiana, Vandy, that could never recruit at Penn State's level. The upside of having better talent for their systems seems obvious. Is there a downside in recruiting or on the field when it comes to having the bulk of their experience at lower levels in recruiting? Fitz, what do you think?
Andy was asked about this last night and asked about what the difference is with recruiting with the logo versus Kansas, Buffalo, wherever he's been. And it's obviously there's a prestige difference, if we're going with the old NCAA football program prestige. The answer he gave, I thought was great. By the way, it's a people business, and you can't let that logo recruit for you. And I thought that was awesome, because so many times we've seen guys that walk in and it's been a situation where Penn State's here. That's a big deal. But at the same time, if you can't follow through with the interpersonal relationships that you have with recruits, with coaches, with trainers, with everybody that comes to play in the recruiting world, then you're kind of shit out of luck. So I think that is the thing that you have to adapt to. And yeah, I think there's a concern's the wrong word, because once you say concern, people get all kinds of worried. You've got different opinions. Or you've seen different things at Indiana, Buffalo, Kansas, Vandy, Syracuse, where Justin Lustig was before Vandy. So you got to use all that stuff, but you also have to use your experience from before that. So Lustig was a PSAC head coach. These guys have been coaches at small schools. That is where you refine your recruiting chops. That is where you learn to deal with people. And that has to be the important thing. So you haven't seen recruiting at this level, but you understand recruiting at this level, if that makes sense. So I think that's been sort of fun to watch these guys try to adapt to things, because the logo, it's going to get you in the door, but then it's what happens after you get in the door that really matters in this situation. And now you bring NIL into it. Maybe it's a little bit, I don't want to say what's the opposite of magnified? It's a little bit less. Yeah, we'll go with that. So I think that is the important thing. So they haven't seen it at this level, but it doesn't take that much take that much time to pick up, because of what you picked up when you were at Edinburgh, because of what the Tom Allen picked up at his spot, at his places along the way. And I think working with Andy specifically, working with Lance Leipold, that's a big deal, because that is the one where you find the evaluations that matter, the guys that you think can play that other schools kind of turn their nose up at, but you think they can play. I think that's the stuff that matters. And that's the advantage that these guys have when you're coming into a place like Penn State is, hey, you don't have to take the stars. You don't have to take the 4-star guy if you don't want to. And we've already seen Penn State kind of turn away 4-star, quote unquote, 4-star talent. So I think it's been interesting to watch that whole dynamic come. So yes, there is reason to, God, I'm going to use doubt. I don't want to use doubt. That's like I said, talking live is very hard.
Yeah.
There is reason to sort of negate some of the stuff that they've learned along the way, but at the same time, it's about how you deal with people at the end of the day. And I think those guys have that ability to make that leap.
I made the comparison. I think at some point there's similarities to Joe Moorhead. I'll just, the part where he says, are there downsides on the field? The point of Andy Kotelnicki's offense, Joe Moorhead's offense over at Fordham, was we don't have the talent. how do we close that gap? And Fitz, I think that it's fair to say in recruiting, it's kind of the same thing where how do I convince a guy to go to Buffalo or Kansas when he might have better options? So all of those muscles, all of those reps of recruiting really hard, now you have the opportunity at Penn State to recruit and have success with better players. And from a schematic standpoint, it's the same idea. How do we close that gap with more talented players, given we've created these opportunities on the football field with this scheme? So I would say it's the opposite of, is there a downside? That's the point. There's an advantage on the field with some of these. That's the idea anyway.
Yeah, I was going more with recruiting there, but yeah, I think that I agree with that. Is like, how do you maximize, and you learn to get by on ramen in college. Like that is what comes through. And that's what when you start getting better cuts of meat, then you learn to be a chef. So I think that's what really can come along. So Tom Allen just got fired in Indiana, but at the same time, he got fired for a completely different job. Like, being a head coach and being a coordinator, completely different approaches, completely different ways to handle. I mean, he's got to handle one side of the ball now. So I think that's what comes into it. So these guys are here for a reason. I mean, this is the highest level. Like, there are some really good coaches. There are coaches that are on Penn State staff that have been approached by bigger programs than Penn State. And count on two hands how many programs are bigger than Penn State. So it's a situation where you're at the highest level. If you don't do it, you can get exposed very fast. I mean, we're looking at that turnover at the wide receiver room, very different. It's after Josh Gaddis. I mean, because those guys came in, they weren't at this level. That's on James Franklin, no doubt about it. But at the same time, that stuff kind of weeds its way out.
Yep. And for context, here's what Andy Kotelnicki had to say when asked, how has recruiting at Penn State changed anything, if at all?
Well, as you guys know, I mean, it's a national brand. Everyone knows it. They know that this is one of the best football programs, historically, for a long time. This place, this fan base, it does speak for itself. But at the end of the day, I think you can't get stuck in a situation where you're trying to just allow the logo to do it for you, because at the end of the day, we're in a people business. And I think when players and recruits come here, I think they'll get a real quick observation of we're very genuine and sincere from the head coach down. It's an awesome place, but I think people would choose to come here because of the people that are here wearing that brand, as you said.
I think that's a great segue to our recruiting show coming up tomorrow, and that'll be it for today's show. Nate, final thoughts from you as we get out the door.
I've talked enough. I'll see you guys.
Yeah, that's the reason we didn't get to the wide receiver question, which again, I can answer later. Fitz, coming up from you, you mentioned recruiting news. We'll be talking tomorrow on the show. Anything you got going on today you want to promote here to get out?
Yeah, I think we're going to talk a little bit about Penn State's efforts outside the region in recruiting potential guys that pop up for official visits and stuff. The hit rate is not high, but it's interesting to see where they target, who they target, and some names that we probably haven't talked about very much.
All right. I'm excited to learn along with the rest of you about that. Once again, subscribe to BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, and here on the YouTube channel, we will give you all the information you need about Penn State football, recruiting, wrestling, basketball, and more. We'll talk to you later.